What's going on? Alexander Thomas here. Welcome back to Game Time 123. We have the second week for the NBL season. It is going up. Last week was a lot of the games were pretty one-sided. Some games were not as much, but there were quite a few. In week one, the close games were all very much in the beginning. But then you had games like Panthers versus the Bulldogs, an absolute blow up between the Kings and the Ravens. And even though there was supposedly a really good game between the Saints and the Falcons, that game ended up being absolutely crushing. Unfortunately, I did not do particularly well this week. I actually ended up finishing up second to last with a 10-10 record. Hopefully I get to do better this week. We'll see what happens on that. But there was another really big game that happened on Thursday. The first game of the week was the Dolphins and Athens game. Now that game was supposed to be really probably a little more one-sided than anything else, but the Dolphins and Athens face off. Athens were winning the game 144 to about 40, and the Dolphins end up winning the game after Mel Yang ended up scoring 74 points, basically making her one of the eights, which is the most points any player has scored, and the most points for a rookie has scored. So these are all the points that happened last week, and it's been pretty split. Poppy currently has the nickname for Puppy is on. It got the first, and speaking of which, there we are. 68 correct answers and 52 incorrect. Going into week 2, we got some tough games. I should look at the division. Divisionally, first right now is by far for the offensive side. It's the Huskies. Huskies are currently number 1 when it comes to it. They did really well. They haven't done so well when it comes to defensive flip, but they're still on the middle of the portion. What really kind of blew it out of the water was the fact of the team that actually did the best in defense, and that would be the Saints. The Saints are the only team that won their division, scoring 131 points. Pretty good. And only allowing 13 in that game. Unfortunately, there was another big problem with the Athen game, which was that there were several teams that were, how would you say this? They were put out of the game. They were ejected from the game at that game, which unfortunately did make this a whole lot more difficult. Right. There are some suspensions that happened last week. In fact, there were suspensions that happened for the Dolphins. Not for the Dolphins, for the Athen. The Athen have a lot of players that are just they got suspended for the next 4 weeks. I have them all here. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players. They're all been suspended, which is going to make it very difficult for the Athen going into the next week because they have a lot of players suspended. On the other side, there's great players, great teams at this given time. Now, I haven't done anything with the actual playoff happening yet. Play will start in week 3. We're only in week 1 right now. But I'm looking at teams that I'm thinking are going to do really well going into this season that because of what happened in week one. I mean, some of these teams just seems like a really big, and some of these teams might have just done, hey, we did really well this week, or we did great this week, or we did barely enough, but it's not going to be enough the rest of the season. So I'm going to look at five teams that I think that are going to still do really well going into it. I have the Hawks still going to do really well. At point they're 6th and 5th. They have both good offense and good defense. I have the Kings. The Kings are still going to do fairly well. They're at 7 and 10 and 3. The Saints are going to do really well. They're all first in division. And I still have down here all the way, and the Huskies still doing pretty well going offensively. And surprisingly, I do have the Dolphins doing pretty well off of the context here. Now, it's not going to be none of these games are going to be easy, unfortunately, and this is going to have to be everything. Now, half teams have won, half teams have lost at this point, but it's going to take a lot more than that. So going into week 2, we'll start off with the Stars and Foxes game. Stars and Foxes, it is going to be a tough game. The Stars are favored by 5. Although, to be honest, the Foxes aren't doing terribly. They're not the best. Let's put it that way. They're one of the mid teams. They're not one of the teams that are going to say, hey, we're going to win. And to me, this is still going to be a pretty tough matchup between these two teams. And let's see. It's not going to be easy, in my opinion, for this to even occur. I have the wrong one. But based on the divisional standing between Stars did Stars did win this week, and they're 22nd and 15th, so they're kind of in the middle of the pack. They're not in the best position. The Foxes, on the other hand, really did a lot better than they should have. I think they're going to be in a position that's not going to be the greatest. Looking at the Foxes here, Foxes did win. They're not as great when it comes to it. I do have the Stars winning this game, and the Stars are very favored. I do think it's going to be a very tough game, much closer than even 5 points. But in the end, that's not going to be an easy game for either one of these teams. Let's talk about the Ravens and the Chargers. Ravens lost this first week, and to be honest, they look like one of the worst teams in the entire league. They're not even. It doesn't even look like they're even trying. They scored 52 points, allowed 123. Yeah, so they're just not in a position. As for the Chargers, the other side of it, they lost 2, but their defense showed up a whole lot better. Even though, and they only lost by, They only lost by 1 point too, so they also have a much better chance. It did come down to a more of an innings, but I do think this is going to be a much closer game. I still have to pick the Chargers off the context here because the Chargers are just a better team overall. But the Ravens might surprise us in this game, even though the Chargers are favored by 27. Leland Cats and Legends. Legends are one of those teams I did not expect to win in week 1. They did pretty well in week 1. The Legends are third in their league right now with 102 points, going on. They only won in overtime, I believe. Is that right? They won in overtime against the Browns. So not surprised, not really expected to be it. They are not exactly the best position, but they're 12th and 26th. So they're not in the worst position. They're just not in the best position. They got to face off against the Leland Cats, who won this week as well, and they're a whole lot better. I like the idea of the Legends to be able to come back and win, coming out here and just be able to win this game. But I do think the Leland Cats are better at this time. I'm going to go with the Leland Cats winning this game. It's going to be a very good game, though. I will say that. I don't think there's a chance it's plus 26. Of course, this is only week 2, so it's not going to be that just one side. The Kings and the Angels. Kings were the only team in their division that would actually win. They're 7th and 10th. They're actually doing really well. 123 and allowing 52. Granted, they played against one of the teams this last week. Not exactly the best team out there for them. But they are looking at a pretty strong position. On my context here, they are playing the Angels, who lost this last week and have one of the worst offenses in the position. Even though they actually only lost by 3 points, the Angels, but when you're placing against someone who has a really good offense, I just don't see you're going to be able to do it. I am picking the Kings in this game. We got the Saints and Dragons. This is going to be a hard one. And to be honest, this could have easily been the game of the week. Obviously, it was not the game of the week. But between these two teams, this is going to be very tough. Dragons lost this first week. Granted, they only lost by 1. And they are currently 17th and 23rd for the Saints. For the Dolphins. As for the Saints, they're first in their division. They're 2nd and 1st. I think this is going to end up being a much more like a very close game, but I think it's going to be a much closer game, like deciding in the 4th quarter. It's not going to be one of those games that decides that the Dragons are going to really go really far ahead in the beginning of the game, and the Saints are going to come back and just win, or the Saints fans. I think the Saints are going to do a whole lot better. I pick the Saints winning this game. It's going to be a very tough game, though. We got the Huskies and the Giants. Both these teams are tough to pick for me, and I believe I picked both of those games wrong last week. Giants did win. They're 29th and 7th, so they have a really good defense. Well, Grant, they only won by 3, and they are playing against the Huskies. The Huskies, on the other hand, scored the most points, even though their defense is not as strong. I think when it comes to defensive position, I think it's going to be very tough for teams like even the Giants to be able to do enough. I think the offense is going to have to really show up in this game in order for the Giants to even have a chance. I'm picking the Huskies winning this game. I do think there's a chance the Giants can just do enough to keep it kind of close, but not enough to win the game. We got the Tex and the Panthers have played. They've played a lot of times. Panthers currently 2nd. They're in their 9th and 4th. Really good defensive position. Misty Young is one of the best players they have on that team right there. Unfortunately, it's going to be a very interesting game to even have for the Tex to come out. The Tex just got very much demolished in that last game. And unfortunately, it's not going to show up well for them. I'm picking the Panthers winning this game. I do think the Tex might get some more rhythm going into play. It's game 1. You don't really know everything at this point in time. So I do think the Tex are going to do better but they're being the last team in the division in offensive is in the one of the worst teams in defensive. It's probably just not going to do well. It's probably going to be closer to 52. I just don't think it's going to be that far off. But I do think in the context, the Panthers will win this game, and it will probably be a pretty substantial side. I would say probably 30 points, in my opinion. The Beagles and the Tigers. The Beagles. Look at the Beagles here. The Beagles and Tigers. The Tigers won their game. They were 11th and 25th, so they're kind of in the middle, kind of the middle edge for the defensive side, but they were not terrible in the offense position. On the other side, they have the Beagles, who lost and are one of the worst teams that comes. However, their defense is a whole lot better when it comes to the context of what it is. I think if they can get the rhythm together, the Bengals might have a chance to win this game. Unfortunately, they're going to still lose this game. I'm picking the Tigers to win this game. It is going to be a closer game. I think it's going to be much closer than 14 points. But it's not going to be good enough for them to win. The Superman and the Hawks. The Superman just absolutely shocked us in this last game. In this last week. The Superman won, which is more. It's almost more games than you actually could think of the Superman actually winning. I've looked at the Superman for the prediction for the Superman. I think it's the Superman here somewhere. The prediction I originally had for the Superman was 1 win. Well, they're already at that, so I think there's a good chance the Superman actually do well. They're playing the Hawks, which is going to be one of the tougher teams, so it's just going to be a very high scoring and a very tough game. The Hawks are 6th and 5th versus the Superman, who aren't the top, but they are 4th, and they're 23rd. So honestly, I think it's going to have to come down to their defense is going to have to show up. Now, with the context of the Superman's, make sure I have it. With the Superman, I'm missing it. Man, getting some points here. They've got some great players in it, but it's gonna really come down to what they can handle. And to me, it's gonna be tough. Even though I think it's gonna be a very close game, I'm more likely to have to basically flip a coin for this game because I do think the Hawks are gonna be a lot better, but the Superman did so much. I am picking the Superman in this game, and I'm probably going to end up being wrong in this game, but I think the Superman are going to win this game. We got the Otters and the Dolphins. Okay. Otters won. They're, however, not good in offense. They're not terrible in defense. On the other side, they got the Dolphins, who are first in the division for the first time in who knows how long, and 3rd and 13th. I think it's all going to be coming on to what the offensive means. If the Dolphins can get an offensive position and do way better than they did, playing Mel Yang, perhaps, is going to make them a whole lot better position. I do think if they play Mel Yang for the entire game, or at least to say majority of the game, let's say 3 out of the 4 quarters, then I think the Dolphins will absolutely win. Mel Yang scored more points than any other team player is in his domains. I think it's going to be a tough game. On for the Otter sides, the Otters really have a kind of a middle-based team. I think it comes down to how the Dolphins score. If the Dolphins can do really well in the offensive position, then the Dolphins will win this game. If they can't, the Otters will win. I'm picking the Dolphins. I'm picking the Dolphins to win this game. I think I'm gonna be wrong about this. Dolphins are favored by 1. It's not gonna be It's gonna be a very tough game. Bulldogs and the Pirates. The Bulldogs had lost this week and have one of the worst teams, worst divisional opponents. Yeah, I don't have a lot of confidence in the Bulldogs. And to be honest, there's not much confidence in the Bulldogs for me. However, I have absolutely no confidence in the Pirates. They lost, they got hits. And to be honest, even though they were able to score enough to keep them in a position where they weren't terribly defeated, the Bulldogs are a whole lot better team. They played against the Panthers. It wasn't an easy game, but the Panthers are a whole lot better when it comes to offense. And to me, I think it's going to be the Bulldogs to win this game. It's going to be a tough game, and I think it's going to be the Pirates really be doing a lot of damage. The Werewolves and the Lynx. Okay, Werewolves currently lost first week. They're kind of in the middle of the pack. They're 19th and 21st. Again, middle of the pack. As for the Lynx, they're first. They actually won, but they didn't do great when it comes to offense. It came down their defense really stepped up. And to me, against the Lynx, I really would like to give the Werewolves the benefit of the doubt here, and I'm going to say that the Werewolves will win this game. But it's going to be a tough one. And to be honest, I think the Lynx are either going to really run away with this game, or they're going to kind of struggle and barely lose or barely win. That's what I have for them. UNC the Knights, now this is not going to be a fun game. Because the Knights, they won. They're 16-22nd. And the UNC, well, they have a good defense. They got to win. They have nothing to really show for it, though. And to be honest, even though I think UNC's got a great team overall, it's the Knights that's going to win overall. All right, we got the Athen and the Warriors. Okay. Athen and the Warriors. Okay, the Warriors. Okay, so I find the Warriors here. Lost and 23rd in ants, only scoring 81 points, allowing only 82, so they're not terrible. But it really comes down to me the fact that the Athen are going to be playing with a lot of players. They're losing. They've lost a lot of players. In fact, they've lost 6 players who will not be playing for the next 4 weeks. I think it's going to be tough for the Athens to come back and win this game. And with the context, the Warriors are not a bad team. They're pretty good. I got to go with the Warriors here. I just don't think there's a chance. It's the Ants. We're going to go back to the Bobcats and Jets game in a few minutes here. But the Lions and the Lightning. Lightning did really well. They did not. The Lions did not. The Lions, in the context for the game, lost and have one of the worst defenses in the league. They are not terrible in offense. But when we look at the other side, the Lightning did worse in offense and better in defense. So really it comes down to which offense decides to show up today. And to me, it's going to be the toughest position for me. I am actually going to pick the Lions to win this game. And the reason I'm doing this is because I think that the Lions have a better offense overall. but it's not going to be an easy game. I do think the Lightning are going to put up a really good game, and everyone else picked the Lightning, so I'm going to be different from everyone else. Indians and Falcons. Okay. Before the season started, I would have said the Falcons are going to be one of the best teams. And I think if I looked at their position, I had the Falcons gain first place in their division, 13-3, and also the Saints at 3-13, the opposite. Bad news. Yeah. I just don't have the confidence in that anymore. The Falcons got blown out. They had no wins. They couldn't do anything offensively. They didn't have anything going for them. And to me, that is not good. If you can't do it in first week with a moderate easy team, because the Saints were granted, the Saints kind of blew out them with an offensive position, then you can't even give me a chance in it. Now, the Indians lost too, and they have a worse team. That is the only reason I am giving the Falcons the win here. Mostly because the Falcons wins. The Falcons have to prove themselves. If they don't win this week, I might not pick them again for the rest of the season. And that's a long way to go in the season. Cardinals and the Packers. Okay, this is a tough one because the Cardinals, they lost. But they did pretty well when it comes to the context of the offensive position. They're tied for 14th. They did 102 points. And they're 30th in defense. But not terrible. They had some great positions in week 1. Look at the context here. The Cardinals play the Dogs. That's one of the tougher division. But honestly, it's a tough now. They've got a much more difficult game when it comes to it. However, they do have to play the Packers. And the Packers lost and have a really good offense and a really bad defense. So it really comes down to what defense shows up. And to me, it's going to be the Cardinals to win this game. I don't see the Packers are going to have enough to be able to do it. Even the Packers are heavily favored in this game. It's just not enough for me to say the Packers are going to win this game. It's going to be a good game if both offenses show up. But to me, the Cardinals did a lot better against the Dogs than the Packers did against the team who they played than against the Supermen. Oh, yeah, by the way, the Supermen won that game in overtime in the end. So, to be honest, if the Packers are able to keep it like a pretty good position in the head, then they got a chance. Unfortunately, it's going to be very tough. And to me, even the Packers kind of screwed it up in the end of that game, but they played really well in the majority of that game. So to me, it's going to be the Cardinals, but I think it's a good chance the Packers could come up and win this game. We got the Dogs and the Colts. And to me, Dogs and Colts. Dogs won this week. They played against the Cardinals. They have won. They're 8th and they're 21st, which is not the best, but they're not the worst when it comes to the context. And I don't think they're terrible. I think they've got a great position. They are currently first in their division. They do, however, play the Colts, who really could not get anything going offensively. However, really good in defense. They were able to hold them down to a low score of 74 points, which is not a lot of points, which is not great when they only score 66. But I think keeping them close in the game is going to be a big position. Unfortunately to me, I can't give them the win this week. I do think it's going to be pretty much a one-sided game for the Colts to win this game. And the Browns and the Bears, the second to last game we are going to be talking about here. The Browns, Bears. Okay. Browns, they lost. They're 13th and 27th. They scored 99 points, and they only lost by 3 against the Dogs. And the Dogs are one of the better teams. So the context, they were pretty good. And even it clearly came down to the last second shot, I believe. Yeah, so it was the last second shot in that game, and unfortunately, it didn't quite go in their favor. Bears lost as well, but they did a whole lot. They did pretty well. It's gonna be a tough game, and to me, I'm gonna go with the Browns. And to be honest, it could go either way in my game. For me, I will pick the Browns in this game, but I do think it's gonna be a very, 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 very close game. And in my opinion, it's tough. It's going to be a tough game. And I could say in this game going either way. Browns are favored by 2. That's probably exactly how the score is going to be. And finally, we got the Bobcats and the Jets. Okay. The Jets won this week. And they're terrible. They don't have a great offense. They were able to win against the Colts, so not really showing much theory here. They got 74 points. They have one of the better defenses. I will say that much right now. Fortunately, they are playing against the Bobcats. Let me look at the Bobcats here, who in context did win this week and are kind of like an average team. To be honest, this game could go either way. And to be honest, it's going to be a very, very close game for me. I'm picking the Bobcats in this week. It's going to be a very tough game. This game could go either way. I believe Jets are actually favoring this game, but I'm picking the Bobcats. It's going to be a very, very close game. A little bit more thing before we get into the end of this here. The only team that's going to have a hard time is going to be the Athens, since a lot of players are suspended for 4 games. And to me, I'm really looking forward to some of these games that occur onto the next week, especially the game, where is this? Game where Milligang, it's over here to the top here, where the offense. I think if the Dolphins do really well, Milliang's looking at probably being in the top, probably at the top, if not at the top. Currently number 1 in the league in points scored, 74. I mean, that's kind of hard. That is it for this one. I'll see you guys in the next. I'll see you next week for next week's points. Next week's for week 3.